The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests, and are not those of Pesmo Radio, its employees or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements of any radio show programs or products mentioned on air, on our website, social media accounts, and marketing materials. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to Pesmo Radio, its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing Pesmo Radio.
Are you a songwriter? Are you looking to turn your songwriting passion into a full-time gig? Whether you are just at the start of your songwriting journey or a seasoned industry professional, this show is made for you. Welcome to the Songwriter Show, bringing together songwriting news, interviews, and community. Now, welcome your host, Sarantos.
Thank you for tuning in, and welcome back to the Songwriter Show. I'm your host, Sarantos, a solo music artist who's been writing lyrics for as long as I can remember. Words are so important to me, and that's why I'm so thrilled to host this show for you every Tuesday evening. I believe that every song is a story. The Songwriter Show is broadcast live on #1 ranked Pesmo Radio and has listeners in all 206 countries in the world and every state in the United States. The station is also licensed with ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and Sound Exchange, and has partnerships throughout the music industry, including iHeartRadio and exposure to over 300 million listeners. Tonight's first and only guest is Dave Isaacs. Musician and educator Dave Isaacs has called Nashville home since 2005. There, he's built a reputation as an ace guitarist and top teacher and mentor to aspiring and professional musicians, songwriters, and performing artists. Dave holds a Master of Music degree from the Manhattan School of Music in New York and has taught music to students of all ages and skill levels in private lessons, workshops, and college classrooms. His first book, The Perpetual Beginner, an instructional memoir about learning music, was published in 2019.
And now, welcome this week's special guest.
Welcome to the show, Dave. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So how is Nashville? Is it warm today, hot, cold? What's going on down there?
Oh, it was hot today. I was out earlier today. It was about 85, but I got to walk in over by Old Hickory Lake, so that was good.
Awesome. So Nashville is one of my favorite places. I've been there a couple times, and I love the music scene, obviously. I love just the vibe of the city. It's tremendous.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful place to live. It really is. It's changing. It's been changing very rapidly, but...
You think it's changing for the better or the worse? What kind of changes you see?
It depends on how you look at it. I mean, if you're looking for the phrase you always heard was that in the old days, Nashville was a little big town, which is what the Country Act named themselves for. And it was a fairly small community, and everybody kind of knew each other, even when people were, at very high levels of the industry. And it's just so much bigger now than it ever was. It's not centralized. You used to be able to walk up and down Music Row, knock on doors, and meet people. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a much more cosmopolitan city. There's a lot more going on. There's all kinds of cultural life. There's, all the things that go with a city growing. Obviously, you have all those problems, but you have all the positives too.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about your love for music. When did you get started? How old were you?
Oh, God. It really as long as I can remember. My folks both love music. There's a lot of music in the house. My father played guitar. My mother played piano, and records playing all the time. So really as long as I can remember, because my mom would play and sing folk songs to us. And I think I connected the most. Like, I took piano lessons several times as a kid and only really took to it when I had a teacher to let me play by ear. And it wasn't until I was a teenager and picked up the guitar that I really got bitten by it. That changed my entire life. And I write about that in my book when I started working on it and thinking about what motivates people. What makes some people really get the bug and do the work that needs to get done to really learn how to play, and some people work at it and just don't get as far. And the short answer, the glib answer, is people will say talent, but there's a lot more to it than that. And what I realized was that when I started playing guitar at 14, here I was, a teenage kid. Your average 14-year-old boy is trying to figure out who the heck he is. And it gave me It gave me a role. It gave me a place to be cool. I was a much cooler kid all of a sudden. And it sort of defined the way that I saw myself. The big insight, or one of the big insights I had, was that when I was 15, I didn't have to be good to call myself a guitar player. It was something, it was a persona I had taken it on, you know? So, yeah. I mean, I was learning how to play, but it was a thing I sort of clicked into. It's very teenage, but at the same time, like, the love for music was, you know, deep. And it made me respond in a way that nothing else did.
What do you think, in your personal story, what do you think drove you to do this? The guitar, the career you've had? Is there a certain thing you can think of, kind of what you described? Is there an emotion or role model or something?
You know, it's funny you say that about it being an emotion, or what, because that was really the conclusion that I kind of came to in starting to look back at my own history and what did this. The thing that is the most compelling to me about music is that it's a connection. And whether it's a connection to the sound itself and the way that you can disappear into it, into something that feels bigger than you, or a connection with the people that you're playing music with, or a connection with the people you're playing music for. And as someone that was shy as a kid and have dealt with anxiety all my life in one way or another, it actually became the safest way to interact with people when I was younger, because I was better at playing music and communicating that way than I was in sitting and having a casual conversation. I had to learn how to do small talk, you know?
Yeah. I think what you just described is sometimes kind of common in musicians. It seems like you said they're more comfortable speaking through their music than having a conversation. And we all know high school is an awkward time for most of us. Mm-hmm. And maybe that was an outlet that helped you.
Oh, it absolutely was, because otherwise, I mean, you know, for better or for worse, and this is something that I had to take on later on in life, my whole self-worth was wrapped up in it, because it was the thing that I felt like made me cool, but it was also the thing that I felt like made me good, made me valid, made me valuable. And that's dangerous, you know, that, yeah. Because, you know, all it takes is for one injury, which I had happen, take away your ability to play for a period of time. And if that's what makes you who you are, you've got a crisis on your hands. No pun intended.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your parents. Were they a big influence on you musically?
Certainly, in that they taught me to love music and that music was important, and how music is an emotional experience. My mom grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and she liked to listen to the folk songs from Appalachia because it reminded her of home. So I grew up hearing a lot of that kind of stuff, and I made an emotional connection with that. And my parents were, let's say, early 60s folkies, so sort of pre-Dylan, but more Kingston Trio era. Sure. And I grew up on Pete Seeger and people like that, and the Weavers, you know. And so a lot of traditional music is something that I came up with, and there's something just so deep and pure about that. And that's really the thing that musically I got from them. Like, I remember sitting and listening to Doc Watson records with my dad and writing down the words to Columbus Stockade Blues, which is a song that I still play. And, you know, there was nothing mountain about my dad. He grew up in the Bronx, but he loved Doc Watson. He loved Segovia, too, though. So those were sort of, when it came to guitar players, I can't tell you I was aware at like 9 or 10 that these are great virtuosos of the guitar, but it was music I was responding to.
Yeah, absolutely. Is guitar your only instrument, or do you play other instruments too?
It's my primary instrument. I play piano and I play other stringed instruments. I play bass, I play mandolin. Only stringed instruments with frets, though. And I'm most accomplished on the guitar, but the piano I've played really at this point for most of my life. So it's something that I use to write on. It's something that I just enjoy. Something else, going back to the question about what makes me do it, is I came to learn as an adult that I like having a tactile outlet of some kind. And so things like I played the flute in 5th grade. It didn't connect, but a piano, a guitar is something that you hit, and that physical response is something that's very satisfying. So I love to sit at the piano and just get into a groove
Yeah.
because it's a whole body feeling. You just picture Ray Charles rocking back and forth,
Yeah, absolutely.
You definitely feel it.
Do you find yourself, your process, do you come up with melody first, music? Tell us a little bit about how you do your songs.
As a writer, I work a few different ways. There is, when I used to write mostly alone, which was before I moved to Nashville, it would be probably a lyrical phrase which would then get developed, and I'd sing maybe just that line. And so the words and the music were kind of coming together in the sense that I don't think that this applies to everyone. I think when you're a melodic genius like a Paul McCartney, that the melodies just come fully formed, For me, I'm always looking at the way music and lyric go together, and the way that a lyric can suggest a melody by the inflections and the rise and fall of the accents in speech, or can suggest a rhythm through the cadence of it. You think about, just imagine reading a Chuck Berry lyric out loud, and you can't imagine the music doing anything different than what it does. So for me, those things are wrapped up together, but I do find it much easier to let a lyric suggest the music than to let the music suggest the lyric. And I'm always boggled by people like Billy Joel that would write all the music, the melody, and then figure out what the words do, because I find that much, much harder to do.
Yeah. And Billy Joel is such a genius. I saw him play in Phoenix last year, and it was a great concert, to be honest with you.
Oh, he's brilliant. And I mean, he's terminally uncool, but he's never cared. I mean, maybe he was cool in 1980 when Glass Houses came out. I can still picture the album cover. He looked pretty cool there. But you know what I mean? He was never hip.
And you're right. He doesn't care, which makes him cooler.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's very rock and roll when you come right down to it, isn't it? I don't care what you think. I'm gonna write this other kind of music over here, and so much range. So I mentioned before I came to Nashville versus after. I should mention the co-writing dynamic, which is really very much the culture of this town. Probably more so in country music, but now in pop and in other genres too. And then it becomes very often lyric first, because you find your idea, you sort of hash out the story, because, not all the writing I do is necessarily going to be linear like that in that country music 3-minute movie tradition, although it's a craft that I really appreciate. If you're going to do that, you've got to figure out who the characters are, what's their motivation, and what's their story. And I found quite a few co-writers here in town that I love to work with because they're so good at that. And one friend of mine, actually, the song that you're going to play, my co-writer on that song, is a writer, a novelist, a screenwriter, and has written several books of philosophy and other kinds of thinking. And we would start off a writing session and end up at the bar, but still continuing the discussion of the characters over a couple of drinks, and then go back and pick up the guitars and finish the song. So it would kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you decide if a song's going to make it? I'm assuming you write daily or weekly, or you have plenty of content. How do you decide if you're going to publish something?
It's just a sense of whether it holds together or not. I mean, time is the real arbiter. That if I still feel good about a song after I've been playing it for 6 months, then I know it's a winner. I know that the feedback is important. At the same time, you have to believe in it yourself. And in my experience, when a song isn't right, I think it's to some degree, just feeling what's vibing back to you in the room, what the energy of the room is when you perform it. But I know that when I'm going through a song and there's a section that isn't quite worked out right, it'll feel like, oh my God, this song is taking forever. Yeah. Like somehow the weakness takes you out of it. And my wife, who is not a writer necessarily, but we've written some together, but she's a very, very good editor and very good at, she's been really very closely involved with my whole music career and helping me make decisions and evaluate things. And if she says, that part doesn't work right there, she would always pick up on the part that wasn't working for me. And she might notice that there was a weakness in the delivery. Well, your voice didn't sound great on that spot. It never quite works. And then when I would look at it, I would realize that the weakness in the delivery was because there was an underlying weakness in the song.
Got it.
And either the song lasts or it doesn't. I have songs I've reworked 4 or 5 times in completely different settings, and if one doesn't click in, then it's done. But then sometimes you pick up something you haven't touched in 10 years, you put a different twist on it, and bang. So you never know.
Yeah, that's true. How often do you try to perform in public? Is it a regular thing for you?
It was. I mean, I was a full-time gigging musician for years before I moved to Nashville. That's an irony. So I used to play 5 nights a week. And then when I came here, I was doing the same thing and, writing my own music and releasing albums and things like that. But I've always taught music. And that was, when I got to Nashville, that was kind of the niche that really opened up for me, because there's lots of people here who can teach someone how to play guitar, but the approach that I was taking in really trying to give people a bigger picture of music really resonated with the songwriters and the songwriting community. And so that helped to to open some doors for me. And then I ended up teaching college for a few years. And when I came out of that, because full-time college gig didn't leave a whole lot of time for playing shows, but I was playing all the time. You can play every night of the week in Nashville if you want to. Not right now, but
yeah.
But the opportunity was always there. But it's a rough living. And I think, just realized that as a teacher, I mean, I'm very confident in my songwriting and my singing and my guitar playing, but I'm surrounded by people who, I mean, everybody's great. That's one of the great things about being here. But as a teacher, I felt like I was doing something nobody else was doing. And devoting myself to that has been a good career move. So now I'm having put this book out last year, I'm thinking more about my own music again and spending more time writing alone and working ideas alone than I have in years. So it's funny how these things kind of flip around like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a famous musician that you'd want to be in the room with if you could pick one? Who would it be?
Oh, God, one?
Yeah, just one.
That's a rough one. Now, there's in the room to have a conversation. There is in the room to watch what's going on. And there's just in the room to be in the presence. I mean, I will tell you that one of the greatest performances I ever saw was hearing Alan Toussaint play a solo piano show in New Orleans. And he played for maybe 20 or 30 minutes in this little piano room. And it was like watching Beethoven. It was just absolutely incredible. And I'm such a fan of New Orleans music and of his writing in particular. So he certainly was a big hero for me. Jerry Garcia was a big hero for me. Eric Clapton is a big hero for me. Pat Metheny is a big hero for me. But so is Miles Davis. So is, John Cage. There's so many, just because music is so huge. And the more I learn about it, the more I want to learn about more different things.
Yeah.
So it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I totally get you. What's a typical week like for you?
Well, pre-COVID or post?
I guess now.
Yeah, nowadays I am teaching exclusively online for the moment. I keep an office in Nashville, and I'm going to be starting to see students there again in a couple of weeks. But I've been enjoying being home, honestly, because now my home office /studio is next to the bedroom. I roll out of bed, I get some coffee, walk into the home office, and I am pretty much bouncing between either working with somebody online or writing a blog or maybe something like a mini blog for social media or something like that. Or I'm spending a lot of time working on transcriptions and video content now. So video lessons, and not just on guitar, but conceptual things about music. For me, the guitar was the thing that opened up all this other stuff, the mind part of music. And it's still the instrument that I love to play. But it's been really cool over the last couple of years to get this broader focus and really start to dig into the music that means a lot to us as a culture, and start looking at, well, why does this matter? Especially when you're looking at you're working with someone that wants to be a creator. okay, well, why does this speak to you? Why does this move you? Well, what can you do? How do you get there? And whether you have ambitions to create or not, what I think everybody really wants to do with music is just it's feeling, right? So you want to be in that. If you're learning how to play the instrument, then you want to be the source of the sound instead of just the person taking it in. So everything I'm doing is all circling, putting those things out there. So the creative work is sometimes content that's supposed to teach something. Like I'm working on a set of solo guitar pieces that I'm going to publish as etudes, as guitar exercises, but written as like music you would listen to. And I'm working on concurrently 3 different guitar video courses. And so, yeah, and then trying to get a blog out every week or 2. So it's circling from one thing to another, but it's constant.
Yeah, it's constantly staying busy too.
Mm-hmm. It has to be. It's how you, well, like the shark, you got to keep moving, right?
Yeah. Tell us about this song we're going to hear in a minute. What inspired it? What do you want us to take from it when we listen to it?
We sat down I wrote this with my friend Stephen Tromley, who is the writer and filmmaker that I was telling you about. And he would bring just an idea or a word to a session. So we came in one day for a writing session and said, I like the name Esmeralda. It makes me want to go, Esmeralda. Oh, baby. And we were just goofing around with this and kicking some ideas around. And the next day he sends me an email and says, under no circumstances should Esmeralda sound like Desperado. And I thought, good God. And the songwriters out there will appreciate this, that Don Henley has planted his darn flag all over the songwriting landscape.
Yeah.
But so we had to rethink it a little bit. And so I mentioned Chuck Berry before. It turned into a little bit of a rockabilly kind of rave up thing.
Okay, cool. Tell us a little bit about when the song was released.
This came out on an EP I did in 2016 called Late at Night, and that's the last solo album I put out.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a listen, and we'll come back and talk about it, okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right, here we go.
Took a shine to me. Why couldn't she let me be? Oh, baby. Oh, baby. She took me places that I've never been. She showed me things I'll never see again. The look in her eye, the touch of her hand, cast a spell on a desperate man. Magnetized and mesmerized, I saw a glance I thought I recognized. Took a shine to me. Why couldn't she let me be? Oh, baby. Oh, baby. She did me in, you know she done me right. She stole my fire. kind to me. Why couldn't she let me be? Oh, baby. Oh, oh, baby. Yeah, baby. Oh, 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 oh.
That was interesting. Is that typically the kind of music you put out? Do you experiment? You do different things?
I do a lot of different things. What would be typical about it is the sort of roots rock element to it, because ultimately I consider myself a rock musician with a lot of diverse interests. But that's very much the core, that rootsy thing.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm rock at heart, and then I experiment in all sorts of genres. But I think most stuff nowadays is honestly a combination.
Yeah, and I think it's cool. I mean, I feel like what's happening is what I had suspected was going to happen. Now that you've had a couple of generations of young musicians growing up with the internet and access to every bit of recorded music there ever was, and so they're so diverse because they can find, they can be inspired by anything. And I feel like the average 18-year-old that I work with, and of course they're all music geeks, so they're more into music than the average 18-year-old, but they're a lot more diverse than a lot of us were when I was a teenager, just because they can access more things.
For sure. I think you're completely right. I mean, listening to LPs and cassettes and all these things we used to do, it's so much easier now to listen to, and even in the background, you just have background music. Subliminally or subconsciously, you're hearing all sorts of influences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Before we talk about your book, about your teaching, so guitar is your main instrument. Seems like you teach a lot. Is there one piece of advice you give most of your students that you think our listeners would benefit from?
Yes, slow down and listen.
Okay.
People try to do things too fast.
Yeah, I think you're right. By the way, one of our listeners, Bob, asked that question, and I think it's a great question. I was going to ask you anyway.
It's a great question, Bob.
Yeah. What do you think when you look at most people that take lessons? Do you think most people give up too early? Do you think sometimes they don't practice enough? Are there a couple of common mistakes that you think you can warn us about?
Yeah, I think number one is expecting too much too soon, recognizing that everyone's going to take the time they're going to take. And number two, recognizing that it actually doesn't take so much repeated effort. It just takes repeated effort. And someone who picks up a guitar for 5 minutes a day is going to accomplish more in a year if they do it every day than someone that picks it up for a couple hours a week and then doesn't touch it for a week. So it's recognizing that it is a long haul, that it is a marathon and not a sprint, and that there is no absolute measurement of progress other than, okay, now you can do something. And I'll just add to that most people try to take on too much and do things that are complicated. And I come back to, this was another one of the big insights that kind of hit me over the head writing this book, is that everyone who inspired me, for the most part, handful of them are great musicians that can do anything. Most of them are great artists that did a thing. And within a particular range, they made music that was their language and their musical world. And that's all you need. And it could be the Ramones, or it could be Yes. It can be so simple or so complicated, but they're valid musical worlds either way. And that's what people need to aim for.
Yeah. Before I forget to ask, tell us about your contact information. Where can our listeners buy your music, stream it, listen to it, or get in touch with you if they want lessons or if they want to just listen to your stuff?
Best way to find me is the website, which is NashvilleGuitarGuru.com. All my social media is also Nashville Guitar Guru. And my music is tricky to find because I've had, 12 albums over 20 years under 4 different names, because some of it's under Dave Isaacs, some of it is under DI3, some of it is under Medicine King. I've had so many, I guess, got 6 names. So I've done a lot of different projects, but I try to keep things collected. If you just search for Dave Isaacs, I'm easy to find. But the Nashville Guitar Guru page is the hub for the guitar studio, the teaching work, and all the other musical outreach work that I do, and the music is linked on there too.
Perfect. Now tell us a little bit about this book. The
book is called The Perpetual Beginner, and it's an instructional memoir. in the sense that it is an instructional book, but the lessons are given by telling stories and then talking about them. So the stories are experiences that I had as a student or as a younger musician, and they're all interactions with one person or in one setting or another that I took something away from that in retrospect was so important that it became core, that it became one of the central things that makes me function as a musician. And these are mostly ideas more so than particular techniques. They're conceptual things. It's about how you look at what you do. And those things became this underpinning that allowed me to build the skills. So it's an openness, it's a willingness to listen, it's knowing what you know versus what you don't know. It's understanding that there's always other approaches, not being rigid but being open. There's so much. I was really fortunate to learn from great musicians, both directly and indirectly. So the lessons in the book are basically saying, here's how I fell in love with music. This is what matters to me. Here's the way I look at it. And these things allow me to have a life in music. And if you look at things this way, on whatever scale and whatever way, that will help you do the same in some way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have a hidden superpower you want to confess to us?
A hidden superpower. I know lots of songs. I don't know if it's hidden, but probably I've never been able to count. I know more songs than I recognize, but I can't remember where I put my keys. So obviously different parts of the brain.
Yeah, I'm sure your wife helps you with that, right? Or throws them at you?
Well, we find each other's. You know how that goes.
Yeah. Any strange compliments you've ever gotten for your music or your lyrics or your guitar playing?
Okay, let's see. I can't use the language, or I won't use the language, but I just remember playing a gig in this kind of a bikery bar in Long Island, New York, where I'm from. And I had a trio, myself and a bass player and a keyboard player, but me and two women, which was kind of unusual. And this drunk woman just came up and said, "Wow, that's awesome." It's like and she was just so foul in the way she described us, and I can't remember what it was, but it was just like if you were trying to be as gutter as you possibly could, which is not at all what our image was, but she loved it. So, whatever the takeaway was.
It's funny, you remember like everything except exactly what they said, right? But
right.
The bitch.
I just remember the weirdness, but
yeah, you blacked it out. You're just like, preserving your memory to like cool music instead of what you said.
Right, exactly. Something like that.
Is there what would you say is the best movie you've seen in the last few years?
Oh, God, the best movie I've seen in the last few years. I don't see a lot of movies, honestly. I probably watch more like TV series and things like that. But movies, God, I'd have to dig for that a little bit. I will say, just to have an answer, that I think Stranger Things is the best thing I've watched on TV in a very long time. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, that was especially the last season was great.
Oh, it was so well done. And I mean, the fact that you cared so much about the characters, and, that's kind of so much of what's on TV is, things need to be character driven. You look at the shows that have, had staying power, and it's got to be harder. Of course, you can do a lot to develop a character in a 2-hour, 3-hour movie. A TV show, you've got to do it over this long period of time, and everyone's got to remember and stay engaged. And
yeah,
I have a lot of respect for those writers.
Yeah, Netflix is killing it. I can't even. There's so many cool shows, and I don't want to watch them, but it just you get hooked on some of these shows, and then you're just before you know it, you've watched like 10 episodes in a row. It's like crazy. Yeah. It's definitely a time suck for sure.
But, we've kind of needed that too lately.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Trying to make good use of the time, but, we need art. So
when things open up again, do you have any cool road trips or gigs that you want to tell us about?
I know that I'm going to be having some kind of larger scale event here in Nashville when we're able to promote things. I used to run a guitar festival when I taught music at Tennessee State University, and it was a lot of fun to do that. And I've kind of wanted to do something along those lines again, like a 3-day workshop where I invite guest teachers in, things like that. And I've got a great facility that I can do stuff in. So that will be, when we're able to start planning these things. But it's great to have access to the kind of musicians I do here. So it's not hard to make a few phone calls and find world-class people that will come in and do this stuff. So it's definitely cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Usually I like to ask people about scams. Anything you want to warn us about in Nashville or just in general to protect each other?
Just don't let anybody tell you they're going to make you a star.
Yeah. Simple advice, but that's
suspicious
so true.
Immediately.
Yeah, that is so true.
There are no sure things.
And don't give them money, right?
Well, it depends on, don't give them money if they're promising to make you a star.
Yeah. If you had $100, where would you advise someone to put it? For their music career, obviously.
For their music career. Oh, okay. Honestly, I would say go do a coaching session with somebody successful that you respect. And just, even if it's to talk to them, any way that you can gain more knowledge from the people who've been there, and of course, maybe that's a tiny bit self-serving because I would like to be seen as one of those people. But, like I said, the book came out of the interactions that I had working with people, and, who's going to help you find your way is the people who've been there before.
That's so true. I think you're completely right, because I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they make the same mistakes over and over. I don't know if you've heard of Taxi, maybe you have, but yeah. I met Jai Josephs there like 5-6 years ago, and I've been taking songwriter lessons, and it's opened up this whole world for me that I never knew existed. Right. But I think you're right. It's, learn from the pros. Instead of just sitting there winging it and singing, now I understand melody. Instead of just throwing loops together or screwing around on the piano, you learn chords, you learn progressions, it really is so beneficial to pick someone's brain or take lessons. I think that's definitely great advice.
Yeah, it's so important, and it does so much it's expanded my life so much, and I try to put that forward, pay it forward to others. Yeah, absolutely, Dave. All right. Tell us your contact info again before I let you go, but I really want to thank you for being on the show, man. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was great. You can find me at NashvilleGuitarGuru.com, and everything on the socials is also Nashville Guitar Guru, so that includes YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. So I'm easy to find. Awesome. All right. Well, again, I want to thank you for being on the show, and be happy to have you on again anytime, man. Thank you so much. All right, Dave. Have a great one. You too. And I want to thank Dave Isaacs, the Nashville Guitar Guru, for being on our show tonight. Thank you all for listening and spending a little time with me this Tuesday evening. To any listeners who may be artists, if you wish to be on the Songwriter Show, please just feel free to reach out on social media or email me. I hope everyone's unique story gets heard around the world. My name is Sarantos. Please join me every Tuesday night to hear other amazing artists share their fascinating behind-the-scenes stories right here at the Songwriter Show. And tonight, I'm going to leave you with my new song that just came out called Stand Up. This is a song dedicated to the coronavirus and the world standing up and getting over it and getting back to life. There might be a new normal for a while, but together, we can handle anything. I know it's tough to be in quarantine, and it's been quite a challenge for all of us. The scientific community has some very smart people working feverishly on a cure. They will solve this riddle. They just need some more time. Most people are good people. Most of us are kind-hearted, but not all of us. Why is fear running rampant? Why is hate so strong? The answer is obvious. Our government and its leaders aren't handling the pressure as well as they should. Leaders shine in troubled times. Here in America, there's much suffering because of our leadership pretending first the coronavirus is fake news, then pretending they handled it correctly. There's over 100,000 people dead. Instead of blaming us, maybe they should focus on listening to us. The rich shouldn't have a louder voice than the poor.
And on top of that, the racial divide in 2020, as evidenced by what just happened to George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and others, is just unacceptable. As human beings, we're all equal. We bleed the same color. We have a simple choice. We can either lay down and give up or accept the status quo, or we can stand up and fight and vote. If we stand up together, we can put an end to this garbage. I choose to stand up and fight. Who's with me?
They're getting sick of running as fast as they can, staring at the same four walls, trying not to be sad. Sometimes people have a hard time getting started. No one should be scared to go to Target. Oh no, But life is good if you look at it the right way. Most people aim to be kind-hearted. Oh yeah. Stand up. We've handled worse weather. Stand up. This won't last forever. Stand up. Let's do it together. Stand up. We got this pressure. Stand up. This bugs the aggressor. Stand up. But we got protectors. Stand up. Stay calm, we're clever. Stand up. Most chiefs didn't see it coming. Head deep in the sand. Pass blame, help the rich as the poor run out of gas. Sometimes people have a hard time getting started. No one should be scared to go to Target. Oh no. Life is good if you look at it the right way. Most people aim to be kind-hearted. Oh yeah. Stand up. We've handled worse weather. Stand up. This won't last forever. Stand up. Let's do it together. Stand up. We got this pressure. Stand up. This bugs the aggressor. Stand up. But we got protectors. Stand up. Stay calm, we're clever. Stand up. We've handled worse weather. This won't last forever. Let's do it together. We got this pressure. This bugs the aggressor. But we got protectors. Stay calm, we're clever. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up.
Thank you for listening to The Songwriter Show. To keep the momentum going, head over to www.songwritershow.com and join our free music community of artists, songwriters, and producers. That's www.songwritershow.com.
Thank you for choosing Pesmo Radio.